We're back. We have finally made it all the way through logical routing. That was a whole lot of stuff that we had to look at and think about. Well, we're not out of networking yet. We still have to talk about bridging, and that's what this video is going to be all about. Logical bridging allows for us to just stitch together an overlay network inside of NSX and a VLAN network outside of NSX through the edge node. Oftentimes is going to be used for, say, migrations, but we'll talk about some other cases, and we'll talk about the differences between routing and bridging. All right, we probably are going to mostly do routing, but bridging's a good tool to have in our toolbox. And we'll talk about things like bridge profiles and how we configure all of this up. So logical bridging is a function of the edge transport node, not of a gateway, not of a logical switch. It's a function of the actual edge transport node. And what we're doing here is we're taking an overlay network and we're telling the edge to bridge that overlay network to a VLAN. And that's going to allow for workloads inside of NSX and workloads outside of NSX to maintain layer 2 connectivity and layer 2 adjacency when that's explicitly necessary, right? Most of the time it's not necessary, but it might be useful in some cases. Migrations, like I mentioned a minute ago, migrations are a huge use case for layer 2 bridging. But there are other tools that may be in your environment, other systems that may be in your environment that really require that layer 2 adjacency. And you want some of them inside of NSX and maybe others can't be virtualized and put into NSX for some reason or another. So we have bridging as another option. Now, these days, it's really far more common for things to work kind of at layer 3 so that routing is perfectly functional, right? We actually prefer in many ways to route traffic around because it allows me to minimize the size of my layer 2 domains and all that kind of stuff. However, it's not always the right answer, right? So we have bridging for when routing is not going to be the right answer, right? Route when you can, bridge when you must, is the way we kind of describe that. Because bridging creates a large flat network domain that, that's part of the reason we have so much routing and why we're doing so much towards routed protocols in the first place, right? So we can shrink those domains, those broadcast domains and things. So here we just kind of see routing. This is what we've been talking about. This is what we've been looking at. This is what we just went through and talked through a bunch of packet walks about, right? Where traffic flows through routers to get from one system to another system. Well, with bridging, we're not going through a router, right? With bridging, app 1 and the physical server here, they're communicating with each other by way of MAC address, not by way of IP address. So this is a direct layer 2 connection that we're putting in place with a logical bridge. All right. And again, that's going to happen. That's going to be passed through a transport, or an edge transport node, which means the traffic's going to go from the virtual machine to the hypervisor to its TEP to the edge TEP, and from the edge TEP into the edge and over to the VLAN. So what do we have when we want to do bridging? In order for this to work, what are we looking at? Well, we have our segments. We have our edge transport nodes, and we have bridge profiles. Now, the bridge profile tells us how we're going to use an edge node in an edge cluster. And we apply that bridge profile to a segment. That's what we mean by a bridged back segment here, is it's a segment that has a bridge profile applied to it. And that's also going to have a VLAN associated with it. So we do all of our bridging configuration from the segment UI. Now, my bridge profile is pretty simple as far as what it looks at. Bridging is an active standby technology, meaning that I have one active or primary edge node and one standby bridge node or backup bridge node. And so I'm going to, in my bridge profile, define one edge node as primary, another edge node as backup, and that's that. Well, if I've got multiple edge nodes in my edge cluster, maybe I want a couple of different bridge profiles if I'm going to be doing more than one, configuring more than one bridge at a time. I may want multiple bridge profiles, right? Here we've got two bridge profiles in this example. Bridge profile 1 says that edge node 1 is my primary and edge node 2 is my backup. Well, bridge profile 2 simply says the reverse. Edge node 2 is my primary for bridge profile 2, and edge 1 is the backup. That way I can use both edges in the bridge edge cluster and still have failover configured for all of my bridges. So in my segments, I can go to the Profiles tab, and there's an Edge Bridge Profiles sub-tab that I can use to create or to add bridge profiles. And here we see that the bridge profile just has the edge cluster and the primary and the backup edge node fields that we need to fill out. We save this, and now we can start applying this to a segment. So here we're editing a segment. We have our bridge configuration where I can set my bridge profile and define the VLAN ID that we want to bridge to, right? At this point, the bridge will be instantiated and we'll be able to pass traffic back and forth from the overlay network to the VLAN over layer 2. Now, can we look at the statistics for what traffic is going across the bridge? Of course we can. If I look at the statistics for the segment, I can see all of that traffic, right? And this is valid for, we can see statistics on any segment, but on a bridged segment, we also get to see statistics about the bridge. And so that's bridging. There's not a lot to it. It's a pretty straightforward thing. And it's something that I think we're not going to use most of the time on a day-by-day basis, right? It's a tool to have in the toolbox. I'm going to be very happy when I need it, that I can get this tool out of the toolbox, but it's probably not something we're using every day. Most of the time, we're relying on routing these days. But bridging's good stuff. If you come back after a break, well, what are we going to talk about? We're going to get into security stuff. I can't wait to see you there.